Very nice to be with you this morning. My name is Andrew Miller, and I work down at Swansea University in the School of Management. And this morning I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about the project that we are running called the CEIC project, and hopefully do some learning as well, give you a little bit of a flavour for what we're about. And at the end of the session, I would invite everyone to make contact with myself if you want to follow up on anything that we've discussed this morning. So without further ado, I'll share some slides with you. I'll start off by going through a little bit about the project that we're running at Swansea University. We're also running it at Cardiff Met as well. After we've gone through that, then we'll do some learning around value creation, open innovation, and hopefully it'll be of some benefit to you guys. Right, well, there's my contact details down at the bottom. So if anybody wants to sort of take a screenshot or photograph those, then they may be useful. So what is CEIC? Well, CEIC stands for the Circular Economy Innovation Communities, and it's a £3.9 million project which is supported by Welsh Government and the European Social Fund, and it's designed to support public sector managers to develop new service solutions to enhance productivity and deliver circular economy benefits. That's really what it's about. So the focus mainly is on supporting public sector, public service organisations. I'd rather use that term because we do have a lot of colleagues from the third sector that are involved in this particular project. And I'd like to say right at the start, this is a fully funded programme. So if you're wondering, at the end of this session, I'd really like to get involved, either yourselves or perhaps you've got a group of colleagues that you feel may benefit from this programme, then it is a fully funded programme. There is no cost to your organisation whatsoever. So it's a project that is really trying to support you to meet, I guess, what is the biggest challenge of possibly of our generation, to turn back the tide on climate change, on the things that we see happening to our environment, that perhaps we're alarmed about individually, but also as organizations, we feel as though we've got to do something about it. And it's really about giving guidance and giving support to organizations that really want to engage in the process of actually making a difference. And to give you a little bit of background, and I'm sure many of you will be conversant with the problem. And what you can see there on the screen is the problem. We're doing too much of this. We're taking stuff out of the ground, we're making stuff, we're using it, we're disposing of it, and we're polluting. And it's causing all kinds of problems within our society. And so we need to be doing less of that, and we need to be doing more of this. We need to be thinking about the potential that exists to engage in what we refer to as the circular economy, to really kind of focus on what we can do to reuse, refurbish, remanufacture, and if we can't do all of those things, to recycle. And you can see, can't you, on the right-hand side of the screen, a Welsh Government document that is entitled Beyond Recycling. Now, actually in Wales, we're very good at recycling. I'll show you some data later that suggests that we're probably the best in Europe and the third best in the world. We're really, really good at recycling, but this is about beyond recycling and really trying to engage with this notion of the circular economy. Some people ask for a definition. What do you mean by the circular economy? And there are many, many definitions, but the one that I like particularly, mainly because it's simple, is that the circular economy is about keeping resources in use and avoiding waste. A real simple definition that I think kind of encapsulates what it's all about. It's about making the best use of the resources that we've got in order to really kind of make a difference individually, but also collectively as organizations. Very much linked in to the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. You can see there on the right hand side of the screen that one of the key aims is to develop a globally responsible Wales, and many of you will work within organisations that have got a statutory responsibility under that act, as well as some pretty ambitious targets for the next couple of years leading up to 2030. So all hands on deck, I think, is the phrase. We've got lots to do within the public sector and within public service organisations to really make a difference over the next few years. And this particular project is really about supporting you in those aims. Now, as far as the program that we offer, and as I said a few moments ago, it's a program that is run in the Swansea Bay City region, and that's supported by Swansea University, and the Cardiff capital region is supported by Cardiff Met. And effectively what we do is we bring a cohort together, and usually about 20 to 30 people from a whole range of organisations, public sector, third sector, and we encourage them to work on a particular challenge that perhaps they've already thought about within their own organisational context, and bring it along to the programme and work on solutions. So the hope is that over the 10-month period, this is a 10-month programme, that participants will work together on those challenges, and at the end of that process, deliver a solution to their organisation. So don't think about this as a training programme. This is very much about supporting you guys with things that may already be on your desk, things that you need to do within your organisation. You need to accelerate them, and here's the opportunity, providing you with the time, the space, the support to actually produce tangible solutions. So there's the program outline. We start off with a foundation day, followed by a 2-day residential, all paid for. And then the cohort meets once per month over the next 10 months. And that's really to focus our minds on the particular challenges and start to develop solutions as we go through the 10 months. And many of our groups will meet independently in between the formal cohort days in order to progress their challenges. And we've had some fantastic results already on the CAPE program. So that's the outline of the program. And what I'm going to do over the next hour or so is really kind of give you a flavour of some of the key themes, and hopefully that this is going to be some value to you, irrespective of whether you actually come on the program. So you'll have noticed that the second slot there is a 2-day residential, and that really is an important element. It's our opportunity, if you like, to develop a community of practice, because that's what we're doing. We're developing a community of practice that's really focused on developing circular economy solutions and to stimulate open innovation. And I'll talk a little bit about open innovation in a few moments, but in essence, it's open innovation is about collaborating. It's about taking advantage of the knowledge, the experience of colleagues across the public sector that perhaps work in different organizations to yourselves, but nevertheless have something really valuable that you can use within your organization. So it is a program that is designed to create a community of practice, but also to stimulate open innovation, where we start talking to each other as a public sector and third sector as well, in order to meet these really important challenges that we've got in front of us. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the residential just for a few moments, because it introduces to participants one of the key methods that we use on the programme in terms of learning. We use experiential learning, and if you look on the slide there, you can see lots of participants on the residential, certainly having a lot of fun, getting to know each other, developing that community of practice, learning to trust each other, and we put on a whole range of different tasks that will enable them to achieve that objective. But the tasks we use are not random tasks. They're tasks that are designed to stimulate thinking, stimulate discussion, get them to think a little bit about the task that they've done and the experience that they've encountered, and whether or not they can actually start to translate that into an organizational context. Well, what have we learned from the experience that we've just had, and how can we relate that to our own organizational experience? And if we can do that, then maybe we can learn something about how we can do things differently. And experiential learning is something that the team that we've put together on the CAPE programme have been very passionate about for many, many years. We work in universities, and perhaps the stereotype is someone sat at the front of a lecture theatre delivering PowerPoint slides, death by PowerPoint. But on this programme, we're very keen to develop experiential learning as a key pillar of the way in which we deliver the programme. It's been pretty tough during COVID, actually, because this type of experience we found very difficult to replicate. We tried to do it, but it's been a bit of a challenge. I'm gonna just show you a little exercise which I'm hoping you're going to engage in. By the way, if you've heard me speak before, you may have seen it before, so please don't spoil it for the rest of okay, you'll know the answer. But I'll show you something here which you may have seen before. You just check it out. Just check it out, and you can see that it's a checkerboard, kind of like a drafts board, I guess, a bit smaller. And you can see various things on it. You can see a cylinder there, and you can see a letter A and a letter B. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. First of all, I'm assuming you can see it clearly. Can somebody tell me, if you had to describe the colour, what colour square is the letter A on? Anybody? You can unmute if you want to, or pop it in the chat, and maybe Bibo can pick it up. But anybody that feels as though they can just unmute, tell me what colour square the letter A is on. Any takers from the room, please unmute.
I'd say dark grey.
Thanks very much. What colour would the letter B be on, Jane? Just to get your feel for it.
Light grey, maybe white.
Light grey, maybe white. Thanks very much. And finally, just a final question, since I've got you, Jane, there on the screen. Finally, would you say that they are on different colour squares?
Yes.
Yes. And give me a percentage in terms of the level of confidence that you would have that they're on different colour squares, roughly.
Now you say that, probably 50%.
Or 50% now, right, now that I've said that, is it? But would you say they're on different colour squares?
Yes.
Anybody else anybody else supporting Jane that they're on different colour squares? Unmute if you want to.
Yes.
Yeah, definite?
Definite.
Okay, so when I tell you that they're actually on the same colour square, you're going to be pretty surprised, aren't you? Yeah? Now watch the next slide. What I'm going to do is I'm going to superimpose two parallel lines, vertical lines, on this slide to demonstrate that they're actually on the same colour square. Here they come. Right, now I'll take them off again if you like. There you go, take them off, and now I'll put them back on. Now what I want you to do, just to prove it, is I want to take your hand, hopefully you can see me, and bring your hands in close and squint your eyes slightly and just look at the squares between the two parallel vertical lines, and all of a sudden you see, wow, Andrew's right. That is unbelievable. And do you know what? The amazing thing is when I remove those two lines, it's almost as though we haven't learned anything. It's almost, well, the visual illusion that this clearly is has reappeared. And quite obviously, the A and the B are on different colour squares. Now you may think, well, okay, you know, that's a bit of fun, isn't it? And visual illusions are always fun. There's something about them that when we ourselves get tricked into something, we almost find it amusing. But it's quite remarkable, actually, that this very simple exercise, this very simple experiential task, when participants start to think about it and obviously realize it's a visual illusion, but when they think about it within an organizational, does it stimulate discussion? Does it get us to think about things in a little bit more detail about life within our own organizational context? We certainly suffer from what the academics refer to as cognitive illusions. And maybe this forms the basis of a discussion about cognitive illusions that can actually take place within the work environment. Does it teach us, for example, about context and how context can be very useful in some regards to frame the data that we receive, and sometimes the context can actually distort the data that we are presented with. You can see the cylinder that's there on that checkerboard that casts the shadow across the checkerboard is actually creating the visual illusion. And sometimes we get information within an organizational context that is framed in a certain way that perhaps means that we interpret that information in a slightly different way. And it's quite remarkable, actually, that this very simple task stimulates some incredible discussion around cognitive illusions that occur in the work environment, and perhaps what we can do to safeguard against them when it comes to organizational decision making. Anyway, bit of fun that was. Now, I mentioned open innovation a little bit earlier on this morning, didn't I? And I'd just like to kind of pause for a few moments. Originally, there was an article that was written in the Harvard Business Review back in 2003 by a guy called Chesborough. And we've very much taken hold of the principles of open innovation on this particular program. On the left-hand side of the slide there, you can see the principles of closed innovation. And as you can perhaps imagine, the article, the original article, was encouraging organizations to embrace open innovation principles rather than continue with perhaps what is a traditional approach. Closed innovation principles work on the assumption that smart people work for us, that we discover things ourselves, that we exploit things ourselves, and we keep others away. Whereas the principles of open innovation are a little different, that they recognize that not all smart people work for us. And we need to find and tap into the knowledge and expertise of others that may not work within our own organizational context. The realization that we can actually discover things together, that we can work together, that actually the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And really, this program, I think, is about encouraging public service organisations in Wales to work more together, to collaborate more, to work together more, to share assets more, in order to meet the particular challenges that we have as a country, as a nation, in order to meet the ambitious targets that our government has set for us. And you know, I think in the public sector, sometimes we can be guilty of operating in silos. I think sometimes in the public sector, we can be guilty of not collaborating, guilty of not speaking to our users, to our patients, to our citizens, to find out what their needs and expectations are. I think in the public sector, we're guilty of not realizing the full extent of the value that can be created by our users. And I'd like us to maybe ponder that a little bit over the next sort of 20 minutes or so. And think about how we as organizations add value, because I guess that's what organizations are ultimately. They're value creating systems, aren't they? And we've really got to be diligent in seeking out opportunities for us to create value, to capture value in the activities that we engage in. So I'd like us to move on to that in a few moments. So open innovation is one of the key principles and pillars of the program. The other overarching another overarching framework that we use on the program is the design thinking approach. And this really dovetails very nicely with open innovation, in my opinion. You can see the design thinking approach illustrated on the slide there. You may see slight variations, and perhaps you come across it in the past described as UX design, user experience design. And the 5 stages, the 5 traditional stages there are set out. Empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. And in the program, in the CEIC program, we take participants through those stages in order to develop their solution. And whilst I don't want to go through it in detail this morning, I do want to talk about some elements of it in terms of value creation. You can see that the first stage there is empathize, and it really is the centerpiece of the design thinking process. Empathize in what sense? Well, empathize in the sense that very early on in the design thinking process, we bring users into a clear line of sight so that we understand their perspective, that we attempt to develop a strong sense of mutuality, the ability to put ourselves in their shoes. And that really does form the basis of us moving through this particular model. So I'd like us to think about that a little bit more deeply. So we think about it very early on when we're trying to develop solutions. And we also think carefully about our users in the latter stages of the design thinking process as well, when we're prototyping and testing, when we engage proactively with our users and say, hey, look at this solution that we've developed. What do you think of it? What's your response to it? Could we do it better? Is there anything that we're missing? So having prototype, we test, and if it's not quite right, then we prototype again and we test again. So engaging with our users and really trying to decipher what it is that they are trying to get out of the service that we're developing or the product that we're designing is crucially important. And maybe you say, of course it is, Andrew, of course it is. So we very early on in the CEIC program, we do encourage our participants to think about the user's journey, and you can see it depicted on the screen there with this rather comical cartoon, in order to identify touch points, if you like, if we describe it as that, and perhaps, you know, in your own organizations, you can think about the services that you offer, the points at which you engage with your user over a period of time. And I'm sure you recognize that there will be times where your user will be very happy with the service that you provide, or alternatively, you can see the user here being very unhappy with the service that is being provided. So understanding our user's journey is something that is crucially important, and more than that, I guess, recognizing that the user journey is underpinned by lots of things that are going on behind the scenes, or in our little metaphor here, underground, by the organization. We could describe it as a service blueprint that tries to articulate what we do behind the scenes in order to deliver that service to the user. And maybe when we explore that in more detail, then we begin to recognize why our user at this juncture is feeling rather unhappy. It's because things behind the scene have been not working as they should. So we do spend a lot of time with our participants that are developing service solutions, thinking about users' journey, points of intervention, how they are supported with a service blueprint, trying to understand that service blueprint in terms of where it's breaking down and what things can be done in order to improve that situation. So, participants will think about future user journeys, imagine them in terms of solutions that could potentially be developed in order to improve the services that we provide to our customer, to our user. And we've got to recognize, I guess, that part of that process, and this is part of open innovation really, is proactively engaging with our users. So for example, at the end of our design thinking process, we're very keen to produce prototypes. Now, when you think of a prototype, I often think, I used to think of a product, something that is mocked up almost to look like a little like it will ultimately, but give the customer a sense of it. But think about a prototype as anything that a user can interact with. It could be a model like this. This is a model of a skateboard park, but would really give a user a sense, wouldn't it, of the design and the functionality of that skateboard park. Or who knows? We were talking some time ago. We had one group of participants that was looking at a new wellness centre in the centre of Swansea, and we were trying to work out how we could get Mrs. Jones in Upper Cwmtwch to look at what was being proposed for the reception area of the wellness centre. And who knows, perhaps when it is finally designed, we can get Mrs. Jones down from Upper Cwmtwch and fit her with a pair of virtual reality goggles where she can see the reception area of the new wellness centre, with all the furniture set out, with the reception desk, with the digital board that tells her when her bus is arriving from Upper Cwmtoch that stops outside to take her back home. And she looks at it and thinks, oh, that's great. That's wonderful. Is that what you're going to build? Yeah, that's what we're going to build. And she says, oh, by the way, if I were you, I would change this or that. We'll take a note of that. It's an opportunity, isn't it, to get users to engage in the process in a very real sense during the design thinking process. And, you know, prototypes can be as simple as a collection of post-it notes on a wall that describes the proposed service solution that is being put in place by the organisation that can be shown to a prospective user for them to respond to and to get a sense of how it's going to look and how well they're going to respond to it. And yeah, you know, we develop our service blueprints with the input from users right at the start in the empathize stage. And I guess we're thinking about it all the way through, but certainly towards the end where we are building prototypes. The kinds of things we've just described to get our users to engage with them and respond before we move forward with implementation. So these things are really, really important in terms of the way that we get participants to engage with their publics, the people that they serve during the CEIC program, and it's really important. I want to talk a little bit about value creation now, and hopefully some of you may have come across this model if you perhaps some of you have done an MBA or previous study. It's a classic model. It was originally brought to us by Professor Michael Porter, who was a Harvard professor in the mid-1980s, and it's a model that has stood the test of time in many ways. But I think it's a model that sometimes we need to adapt in terms of the challenges we face around climate change and reinventing the business models that have dominated our thinking for the last 30 or 40 years. We need to rethink them slightly, and we've been doing this a lot on the CEIC program, trying to reimagine some of the business models, some of the operating systems, if you like, that have dominated the way that we conduct our business. Now, I want to explain this model to you, and I'm going to assume no knowledge. And I'll try and explain it in the way that I often will describe it to my students. What we've got here, right? What we've got here, described as the value chain, is an organization, a business. It was originally designed, I guess, for a private sector profit-making organization. But what we've got is we've got a picture, I guess, of an organization, and the best way to describe it, I don't know whether you can see me. You probably can. I can't see you guys, but if you can imagine that you're either an eagle on a bright sunny day, Or you could imagine yourselves in a hot air balloon, and you're up above a factory, and this factory is an amazing factory. It's got a glass roof, so you can see everything that's going on inside it, you know. And what Porter has tried to do is he's tried to disaggregate the activities that occur within an organizational context, right? And you can imagine, we've got the primary activities down here. Okay, so you've got inbound logistics, operations, outbound logistics, marketing, sales, and service. Okay, and on the top you've got the support activities, procurement, technology development, human resource management, and the firm's infrastructure. Okay, so we've got primary activities and support activities. Okay, and if we can imagine for a moment, I know you've got, most of you guys are all public sector, right? But just go with this, because it's important that we understand the model before we then start thinking about public sector and we start thinking about sustainability and those kinds of things. But let's just understand the model to begin with. So let's think this factory with a glass roof is and you can see everything going on, right? You can see everything. It's frenetic, and you can see. Hopefully, you can see my laser pointer. You can see a lorry pulling in through the factory gates, right? Follow my laser pointer, and it's coming in here. And the first place it goes in is inbound logistics, right? Now you can imagine inbound logistics being like a warehouse. Yeah, where all the components that are being used to manufacture, let's say, a brand new car. Let's use that as an example, right? They all go into inbound logistics, okay? And then we know that from inbound logistics, from the warehouse where all the components are that are needed to manufacture this brand new vehicle, they go into operations, right? Lots of value is being created here because you've got components that in and of themselves are not really worth anything to a customer, are now being put together on an assembly line, okay? And a brand new shiny car is being created. So lots and lots of value is being created in this part of the value chain. Okay. And then the brand new vehicle that's just been manufactured goes into outbound logistics. We often see them on fields, don't we, outside factories, all bright and shiny, ready to be shipped. We've got sales and marketing busy trying to communicate with customers and prospective customers about these new products that they need to buy. We've got an after-sales service that provides a valuable service that, certainly as far as the customer, adds value to the entire process, because we do think about these things when we purchase a car, for sure. And so those are the primary activities. And then we've got the support activities. We've got procurement, purchasing. Well, we know all about that because we've got departments that procure products and services, don't we, in the public sector, procurement, yeah. We've got technology development. We rely on it constantly, technology. We've got human resource management, making sure that the right people are in the right place at the right time in order to facilitate the delivery of products and services. And then we've got the firm's infrastructure, bit of a catch-all, things like legal, possibly accounting and finance, sometimes operated centrally. Yeah. And those support activities are, you can see the dotted lines here, are supporting these primary activities. And all of this system, the way that Porter tries to get us to think about it is as a value creating system. And he encourages us to go through each element of the value chain to try to determine whether or not we are adding value. We could actually destroy value if we get it wrong. And maybe we'll talk about that just in a few moments. But this is about value creation. And do you know what he said? You know, what Porter said is, you add value in two ways in an organization. So jot it down if you haven't come across this, because it is quite important. You add value in two ways in an organization. Number one is through cost efficiency. Okay. In other words, doing what you're doing, but using less resources. So organizations are constantly looking to add value through cost efficiency. All right. Okay. And Porter is encouraging us to look at different elements of the value chain to try to establish where we can add value or add greater value than we currently do. Now, let me give you an example. We've been using the auto industry, haven't we? And about 35, probably 40 years ago now, that there was one really smart individual working for a Japanese company. And you know what the problem in Japan is? That the land is so expensive, so expensive. And there was a smart individual many years ago that had a wonderful idea, and what they thought was, well, do you know what? If I can organize, so instead of having a huge warehouse here, I could organize so that my suppliers could supply me with the components that I needed. So here's my truck going through the factory gate again. So if I could arrange my suppliers to supply me with the components that I need, just at the point at which they needed to go onto the assembly line, if I could organize the logistics of that, then I wouldn't need to have a large warehouse. I wouldn't need to have the land to build it. I wouldn't need I wouldn't need to heat it or light it. I wouldn't need to employ people to manage it. And I know it's going to be difficult. I'm going to have to get procurement really clued up. It's probably going to be a bit of technology so that our systems can speak to the systems of our suppliers. But if I can manage it, then I could really add loads of value. And there's an example of adding value through cost efficiency, isn't it? We probably are all guessing the system that was designed. It was called JIT, or just in time. A system that revolutionized actually the way that manufacturing takes place all over the world. And cost efficiency is one of the main methods that organizations use to add value. Excuse me. The other way in which organizations add value, according to Porter, was through product or service enhancement, where the cost of the enhancement was less than the premium that the customer was prepared to pay for the enhancement. Yeah? Hope you got that. Yeah? You can always enhance a product or a service by throwing money at it, but unless the person that's paying for it is prepared to pay that extra money and more, then it's not worthwhile, is it? So those are the two areas that Porter said that you add value. And it was rather interesting, my example of just in time, because it recognized that organizations not only have to think about the value that they can create within their organization, but also they have to realize that they have the potential to create value outside of their organization. And this becomes really exciting, because I think it really does enable us as public sector organizations to start thinking innovatively about the creation of value. Now, in my example of just in time, I just told you, oh, by the way, you can see these are little value chains, yeah? Okay. All right, same shape, yeah? So I already said to you that in order for that to work, that organization there had to work really closely with their supply chain, really, really closely, real strong relationship, in order to ensure that that actually worked, because it's no good for it to be just too late. It had to be just in time. And so value is pulled through this system. Okay. And not only that, let's take this forward 30 or 40 years. Yeah, because if we stick with the automotive industry, okay, here I guess you've got the distributors, you know, your dealerships. We got some big dealerships in Swansea, you know, Days or Trainers is gone now, the BMW garage. It's Cintar, I think it is. Anyway, I suppose they're represented there. And then we've got the customer's value chain. What's that about? Well, this is about the potential of customers to actually add value to the process. And this is where I'd like you guys to start thinking about your customers or your users, whether you work in health or social services or any other area of the public sector. Start thinking about how your users can actually add value to the process. Not only by feeding back to you in terms of, oh, that looks like a good service. I think that meets my needs. That's great. But think more innovatively about how customers or users can actually add value to the process. Now, let's stick with the automotive example to illustrate. And then we'll start homing it in on public sector and sustainability, right? But let's stick with the automotive for a minute. You know, these days, you can go into the BMW dealership, right? You can sit at a desk in front of a tablet and you can design your vehicle. Yeah, you can design your vehicle. So if you want a brand new Mini with a chili pack, with a Union Jack on the roof, with leather interior and all the rest, all the bits and pieces, you design that in the showroom. Now, just think about it. What that means is that instead of this organization back here just building vehicles of a certain color, of a certain spec, putting them on a field and hoping that people will buy them, now we've got a system where the customer designs the vehicle, okay, and that vehicle is pulled through the system. Advances in things like flexible manufacturing enable companies to mass customize. amazing innovations in that area. So the prospect of vehicles sitting on fields unsold, because not many people want to buy red Mini Coopers, doesn't exist. So here we have an example of customers really adding value to the entire process. Now, can we think? Do we have examples of where users, patients, citizens can actually add value to the operations of the organizations that we work for? Hopefully, we can start thinking of what potential exists in terms of value creation and value capture. This model, as you're appreciating, I think, this is my opinion, has always been quite linear. Okay? In other words, it starts here, you've got suppliers, through the organization to distributors and customers. It's very linear. And what we need to be doing is we need to be thinking about opportunities to engage, here's the word, in reverse logistics. Yeah. We need to be thinking about all of the opportunities for customers to reuse, to redistribute, to refurbish, to remanufacture, to recycle, and providing them with the wherewithal and the means and the support to do that. Yeah. So whether you work in the NHS and are involved in providing orthopedic equipment that usually ends up here. Yeah, that's where it ends up. And putting in place systems that will enable customers not only to engage with you in terms of the design and the delivery of your service, but play an active part in getting the public sector to engage in the circular economy, because it does need their support in order to make this work well. And you know, I challenge you and to get and encourage you to think about the opportunities that exist to add value through this process. Let me just show you this slide here. I'll look at it in a few moments, but what it says up here is so true. Reverse logistics should be as sophisticated as forward logistics. Yeah, and here's an example here of just one product. You know, and don't think, oh, I'm in public sector, I don't have anything to do with product. Yes, you do. Yeah. 60% of the carbon footprint of the public sector in Wales relates to procurement. 60%, right? Yeah. So you know, we can see here the potential, can't we? In terms of post-consumer, after the product's been used, in terms of either remanufacture in the first instance or recycle. Yeah. So we've got to start thinking about, we've got to start thinking innovatively in terms of circularity. This idea that we've got to move from a linear business model in everything we do to a circular model that enables us to make significant inroads to the significant challenges that we have to meet. This next slide, I thought I'd put it up because it illustrates some of the projects, some of the solutions that are being worked on the CEIC program that really are about reverse logistics, about adding value to the existing value chains that exist within the public sector. And the top left one here, I guess, is an obvious one. We shouldn't be seeing orthopedic equipment being discarded. How much orthopedic equipment is lying in people's homes unused, in garden sheds or in garages, ending up in skips? There has to be a system that enables equipment like this. And there's much in the NHS that falls into these categories that can be remanufactured or redistributed or reused, rather than simply being discarded and ending up in landfill. We've got a number of suppliers in South Wales that offer refurbished office equipment. So if you are in a position to procure office equipment, please go down this route first. Yeah, please go down this route first, where equipment that is equally functional can be used and purchased from companies in South Wales that are actively manufacturing, remanufacturing and refurbishing office equipment. We've got a fantastic cohort that's looking at the use of asthma pumps in the NHS and the shift from one method to another that has a massive impact on the carbon footprint. There's a group of clinicians currently looking at that. There's a cohort in Cardiff looking at methods to reuse contaminants captured in mine water. Well, that was quite an interesting one. Reusing and capturing that. And I put an MRI scanner up there, and you're probably thinking, those of you that work in health perhaps can recognize it. To mention something to you about procurement that is, I think, quite important to mention. General Electric make MRI scanners, and I know they've done a lot of work on this. They kind of changed their business model. They tend to lease rather than sell their MRI scanners. And the move into that, and we're talking about procurement here, and it goes for lots and lots of stuff that public sector organizations procure. If you are able to move to a lease model rather than a purchase model, it has some desirable effects. And I'd like just to tell you what they are just for a few moments. Some of you may be familiar. If a manufacturer of a piece of equipment knows that they are going to retain ownership through its life and will then take it back at the end of its life and decommission it, then what that does is it incentivizes them to design in circularity. So when they design the MRI scanner, or when you think about it, any other piece of equipment, when they design it in a way so when they decommission it and take it back, that they can disassemble it effectively. They can use components within it in order to refurbish and remanufacture and then put it back out. Yeah. So in a very interesting kind of way, a shift in procurement policy to emphasize lease rather than purchase has a very desirable effect in terms of encouraging circularity to be built into the design of products. And that's a very, I think, a very positive move if procurement authorities can think very carefully about those kinds of policies. Yeah, you know, there's lots of examples of this, and I guess you see that if we all move to a lease model, then you can even imagine with, you know, companies that produce power drills, if they knew they were taking them back at the end, then of course they would be more encouraged, more incentivized to remanufacture and recycle than they would otherwise. We're doing pretty well in Wales. Yeah, we are doing pretty well. You can see on a recycling level, Wales is a real success story. Some of you may have seen these graphics before, but this is from 2012-13 to 2019-20. You can see the key here. Red is very poor and dark green is very, very good. And we can see that this is where we were in 2012-13. Wales still doing pretty well. I can see that Swansea and was yellow at that point. Moving up to here, 2014-15, we can see we're improving. We're all green, and some areas moving into dark green. 2015-16, again improvement, and here 2019-20, we can see that we are really doing rather well. But as we said earlier on, you know, this is about beyond recycling. This is about really embracing the circular economy. And in order to do that, we've got to really think carefully about how we create value and how we encourage what we've described as reverse logistics, encouraging reuse, redistribution, recycling ultimately, rather than going into landfill. Okay, any questions?
Thank you. So my background is procurement, so I'm glad to see our porters in there, and you know, it's all things that we know. And I've done some work in the past on customer-led change and customer-led value. But I think the thing that we struggle with in the public sector is who our customer is.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's something that you've come across or would have any comments on helping us, because often we're dealing with internal customers rather than external customers who would be the final user of any service you're providing.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think this notion of the internal customer, I think, is one that needs developing for sure. I think in the public sector, you know, you're often looking to Welsh Government in terms of ultimately, you know, the body that funds a lot of the resources that you use. So you've got one eye on Welsh Government. Ultimately, of course, our users, the patients that don't come along with their wallet and their credit card because it's free at point of delivery, and in a sense, from an economics point of view, that does distort things a little. There are some there is some conflict here for sure. I think the constraints in terms of resources are well known to us all. On the one hand, but I think, you know, Welsh Government does really need to bite the bullet here and recognise that in order to make inroads in terms of procurement policy and moving in the direction that we need to move in, that in the short term, that may cost a little bit more money. And, you know, I sometimes get a little bit frustrated because the noises that come out of Welsh Government from one department that are really pushing this agenda in terms of net zero by 2030 and how important it is that we put our shoulder to, you know, to the plough. But I think that needs ultimately to be translated into shifts in procurement policy that enable local government, NHS, to procure in a way that really helps us achieve those objectives. So I don't know whether I've really answered the question there, Claire, but I'm recognising that there is a conflict in terms of, you know, who is our customer here.
Thanks, Andrew. I don't think there is a one answer, is there? It's just something that I think is a barrier again for delivering, you know, circular economy for us.
I mean, sometimes I think there was a very interesting article written. In fact, I'm just reaching across here. I may have it here. Yeah. MIP, the Healthcare Manager magazine this month. A net zero NHS transforming healthcare to tackle climate change. I don't know whether you picked that up, but really, really interesting article that this is about this is about sort of 1 million decisions really that are made by millions of people every day that work within the NHS, and included in that, I think, should be patients in terms of their role. And I mean, the one that springs to my mind, because we've got a challenge group that's looking at it currently, is the shift in terms of asthma medication. You know, the difference in terms of carbon footprint between the traditional asthma inhaler and the newer powder-based asthma inhalers is incredible. And whilst, you know, there's a job to be done in terms of persuading clinicians to prescribe differently, there's also a need for patients to engage in that process and recognize that if a medication is equally as effective, then they need to use the one that's got a lower carbon footprint rather than insist on the old medication, you know. Another thing we were chatting about the other day, you know, I was speaking to the exec director responsible for waste in Carmarthenshire Council, you know, and the importance of fully engaging with citizens around curbside delivery, curbside collection, and ensuring that they're doing what they should be doing in terms of recycling and the separation of waste, you know, and we had quite a big discussion around the need for behavioural change for all of us, really, in terms of the way that we recycle. Interesting thing in that article that I just referenced a few moments ago. You know, there was a senior clinician that was talking about the use of rubber gloves, you know, of surgical gloves, you know, massively overused in his opinion. and it just brought it home to me that yeah, you know, it's a million decisions really that need to be thought about, and that really suggests that a lot of it is cultural change within our organisations is what ultimately will affect change in that area, you know.
We've had something from Jane who says recently saw an initiative in Swansea where you have a borrow library for household items, which you give a small fee for, and you return it when you've finished.
Yeah, and funny enough, you mentioned that the opportunity in Swansea to borrow assets, things, items, etc. We've also got a group on Cake in Pembrokeshire that are looking at a community hub that includes that kind of thing, opportunity for redistributing and borrowing various things that are needed rather than going out and purchasing them. So yeah, that's one of our challenge groups actually looking at that. So if you've got a phone, just to I will send these slides through so they can be distributed, but if you've got a phone, just you can capture all that. There's my email. The next cohorts that we've got starting, we're 14 are being run in total across South Wales, but we're right towards the end now. So we've got the last two. The next one's starting on the 29th of September, and then we've got one start in the following week, and that's it. So it's the last opportunity really to benefit from this funding. So please, if you've got people in your organisation that you think could benefit from the programme and getting some focus in this area, then please ping me an email and we can sort that out. Well, that's pretty much it from me. Other than to say thank you for your logging on to listen to me, and thanks for your engagement, and hopefully I can catch up with you at some point.